You always want to start by making sure your faces are square.
Checking with a square. And exposing the minimum amount possible of this whirring blade. So, see here, I barely have that covered. Never ever operated without this cover, because that's going to cost you hands fix it. So, I'm just going to move this in and do the blocks first. Now I've marked these the same as I've marked if I was to look by hand. I'm just giving myself just a couple of millimeters. That means that no matter what happens, the finger can't get down on the blade. Again, this is set pretty aggressively, so I'm just going to take it about a half a mil.
This is the point where it gets noisy. Sorry. Never forget to use hearing protection, and to quote the great Norm Abram, don't forget to wear these safety glasses.
So the key is to avoid having your hands over the blade as much as you can, or at all. On longer pieces it's very easy. So this is this guy as an example. So as you're pushing it behind, and you keep moving like this. When you get enough over there, you put a weight on this. Work your way through. Again, always avoiding the blade. Never inside this green area. Like that, you're pushing. Once it gets here that you can get across, you're pushing it through. And that means that it reduces your risk. The same applies when you're going through the top. Exact same thing. Never have your hand over the blade. Now, because these are very short, I'm using a different variation of this, where I'm using my thumb and this knuckle. I'm holding them up here and making sure to make fists with the rest of my hand. So that means that will allow good contact and I can push it through well. This is all the amount of sticking down the timber. As long as I keep that and I keep my hand well balled up, there's no risk of me hitting my fingers. If you were pushing like this from behind with your fingers down, you could very easily clip the top of the blade. Safety first. Material is often kind of sort of like this because of the expansion and contraction. So what we're doing is we're taking the best two edges. Let's say this one's a bit straighter, and I'm marking that as my face. Then that's all I'm going to do against here. So light pressure against the thumbs and forefingers to push that through against the fence, because I know the fence is square, until, well, actually technically it's this way, until I get this and this in line, and then I'm taking note of, normally I just remember of what side it is. So when I want to do the bottom, I'm putting this against the fence, and then I want to do this face, I'm putting this against the fence. That way you end up with as square as possible. Whereas if you weren't paying attention to that, you would end up reforming this rhombus shape, no matter how hard you tried. So just always remember, always work off your face side and fix it. For flatter stock, you run into this problem a lot, where you get this cupping. I don't know how well it's showing up on camera. With that, all you want to do is we're going to establish the side with the cup, 2 points that are going to surface down. We get that black, that becomes our face side, and again we go through. Now, because these are wider and longer, I can put them through my thick duster to do the other side, and that will give me a much squarer edge.
So here, just a quick time lapse showing me using the methodology I've discussed before. You'll see with the longer board, because of that cup, we're removing a lot more material. I have to take a lot more passes before we get down to a flush face. It's always worth considering how much you're going to have to remove to see if the stock is usable. Now on to the biggest issue you'll have with the thickness.
I want to talk a little bit about the methodology I was using there that you would have seen the time lapse. So I feed them in one after the other. The reason for this is to avoid us on the snipe. I've got a quick little sketch here I'll show you. So basically within the machine you have a feed roller and the turning blade. What happens sometimes is when the feed roller grabs a piece of timber, it can hop it up a little bit, and as it bounces, the blade will take a lump out. So you'll end up with something like that. And I'd love to say that's exaggerated, but that's quite a light compared to Snipe. Whereas if you feed them in one after the other like I did, you reduce the risk, and I always keep the same part on the end and on the start and at the end, sorry. So that means the Snipe only happens on those two boards and I can cut it off. Whereas if I was leaving gaps, every board would get a little cut off the end. Now you can avoid that by always cutting over length, and you can chop it off. But this is a good method too. And also one thing you may have noticed, that it probably is hard to see on the thing, is I alternate where I push them through to make the most out of the blade, because if you keep sending it through one spot, which is the problem with this particular planer thicknesser, that the fence doesn't come across, you'll wear out the blade. And you can see here where there's actually a chip in my blade. That's from when I was doing the planing operation. So I'll probably pass this through the thicknesser again at another point to cut that out, now that this side is nice and flat. But just something to be aware of. Now all this can also be sanded in most conditions, or planed, and a lot of this is going to get chopped up. So